you're here to find some underappreciated shows or maybe hear me praise a few old favorites, you've come to the right place. This is Restless in Peace, and today we're spotlighting the place promised in our early days. I'm Fennec, and I've been an anime fan for almost a decade and have watched hundreds of shows. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with friends. If you haven't seen The Place Promised in Our Early Days, spoilers ahead. The Place Promised in Our Early Days is about a pair of teens, Hiroki and Takuya, as well as their friend Sayuri. The two boys are building a small airplane so that they can fly to the mysterious tower at the end of the horizon. They decide to tell Sayuri about their plan, and the three make a promise to fly there together once the plane is done. But one day, Sayuri disappears. And this is where I start mumbling. During this episode, I aim to debunk this movie's happy ending and prove it's actually a really depressing one. So let's start with where Sayuri disappeared to, and that is a coma. She suddenly disappeared from the boy's life because she transferred to a hospital in Tokyo where she stayed in a coma for 3 years. After those 3 years, it was found out that her mysterious condition is somehow related to the tower, which her grandfather built, by the way. And some agents took her to the tower research facility, which one of the boys, Takuya, now 3 years later, happens to work at. Hiroki and Takuya figure out that the only way to wake up Sayuri is to take her to the tower. So Takuya abducts her from the research facility, and they finish their plane, fly her to the tower. She wakes up, and then they blow up the tower because for whatever reason, Sayuri waking up causes the tower to start swallowing the world, so they need to blow it up. Anyways, all's well ends well, right? No, not by a long shot. By the end of the movie, Hiroki and Takuya's ultimate goal is to save Sayuri, so logically, saving her means a happy ending. But they haven't saved her yet, they just woke her up. That's the first step of what's going to be a very long process. Let's think for a moment. What happens to Sayuri going forward? The short answer, not a lot of good things. The long answer, I'd say that sleeping for 3 years can actually be quite traumatic. It's possible that she would develop a fear of going to sleep, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say a fear of not waking up. Now, normally, I won't be too worried about that because when a patient is comatose, it's usually as a result of some kind of an event, like a car crash or some kind of other accident and or traumatic event. And so the trauma would usually relate to the event and not the coma itself, if at all. And when talking about medically induced comas, I'd say there is even less trauma involved because the patients are often informed of this before it happens. This gives them a bit of time to prepare for it mentally, so I'd say you can pretty much rule out trauma from medically induced comas. The problem is this wasn't a normal coma. Sayuri was dreaming for 3 years. She was basically living in her dream, putting all the specifics of the dream aside. She was consciously alone for 3 years. She had minimal effect on her surroundings. The dream pretty much did whatever it wanted, and she basically had minimal control over the entire situation. But what makes all this actually matter is that at the end of the movie, it is also implied that she remembers the entire thing. So from her perspective, she was living in solitude for 3 years without the ability to do anything about it. I personally love being alone, like really love it. But even I'd never be able to handle 3 years of minimal human interaction. No, not minimal, zero human interaction. Not even close. This also brings up another thing she might develop, by the way, being abandonment issues. If you were left alone for 3 years and then suddenly you had people around you again, would you want to be alone again? Or would it actually take you some time before you're ready to be left alone again? There is also the difficulty of going back to daily life. Hiroki and Takuya have a very bright future ahead of them. After all, they built a plane together and they haven't even finished high school yet. But Sayuri, she probably has to go back to middle school, which isn't going to be very easy considering her age. I'd imagine it would be harder for her to make friends. She's more likely to end up bullied because of how much she's going to stick out. And I'd imagine that after 3 years of not studying, going back to it isn't going to be all that easy either. Then there's also the fact that she doesn't seem to have any family, and the only people who are invested in taking care of her are a couple of high schoolers. Then there is the giant war that just broke out. So most people are going to be preoccupied with that. And then there is the fact that those two high schoolers I just mentioned, Hiroki and Takuya, yeah, they're terrorists, which, by the way, kinda helped start this war. So it's pretty safe to assume that they're gonna be pretty preoccupied with it. And at the end of the day, I don't think Sayuri is in a very good position at the end of the movie. Like I said earlier, waking her up is just the first step of many. So I think that with all that said, I've pretty much debunked the place promised in our early days' happy ending. So all in all, Sayuri is a very happy girl who's going to have a very happy life. Finally, I do recommend you watch The Place Promised in Our Early Days if you haven't, and please notify me through the comment section if you're on YouTube or through my website if you're from one of the podcast platforms. You can access the website in the show notes below. Tell me what you think about the episode. Did you like it, or would you like to hear more episodes like it? Or you can just comment whatever you want. Please like, subscribe, and share with friends. It helps me a lot, and I greatly appreciate it.